Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready to take another deep dive. We're going to be tackling some everyday English conversation skills today.
Sounds good to me.
So we're going to be looking at this really cool episode from an English learning podcast.
Okay.
And it's actually geared towards like intermediate learners, which is perfect because, we want to make sure that we're giving our listeners, actionable advice that they can actually use in their daily lives.
That's the goal.
So it's full of these really practical tips. But what we're going to do is we're going to go a little deeper than the podcast and really try to analyze like why these techniques work.
Definitely. I think bringing in like the linguistics and the communication theory behind it all can be really helpful.
Exactly. Because sometimes even if you know all the right grammar, conversations can still feel a little off.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think a perfect example of this is small talk.
Oh, for sure.
It can be so awkward.
It really can.
You're just like standing there trying to make conversation.
I know, and everybody does it.
Yeah.
I think that's the funny thing is like even native speakers, we engage in small talk all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a reason for it,
Absolutely.
It's not just about filling silence. It serves a really crucial social function.
And the podcast even gives an example of this with the weather.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Like, they give you the line like, it's such a beautiful day today, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The universal conversation starter.
Right.
The weather. Who doesn't love to talk about the weather? But you know what's interesting about that sentence?
What?
It's not just a statement. It's a question.
Okay.
A tag question, to be precise.
Excellent.
And that little isn't it at the end. It really does a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to keeping the conversation going.
Oh, so it's like more than just being polite.
Exactly. It plays into this like fundamental human desire for reciprocity. When somebody asks us a question, even a simple tag question like that, we almost feel compelled to respond.
Right.
It's like an unspoken social contract.
That makes sense.
And that response is what keeps that conversational ball rolling.
So it's like a little nudge to get the other person talking.
Exactly.
Like that.
That's a good strategy.
Now, the podcast also talks about asking open-ended questions.
Oh, yeah. Those are good.
And they give the example of what kind of music do you like?
Yeah.
Versus do you like music?
Right. And it seems like such a small change in phrasing.
Right.
But it can have a huge impact on the depth of a conversation.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear you sort of break that down from a communication standpoint. Like, why are open-ended questions so powerful?
Well, let's think about it for a second with a closed question. Like, do you like music? You're only going to get a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
It's a dead end.
Right.
But when you ask, what kind of music do you like? You're inviting the other person to elaborate, to share their preferences, maybe even some of their passions. It's an invitation to reveal something about themselves, which is a powerful way to bond with somebody.
And it takes the pressure off of you to come up with things to talk about.
Exactly. You're putting the ball in their court.
I love it. Now, I know this podcast is specifically aimed at non-native English speakers, and they bring up this common mistake.
Yeah.
Confusing the verbs do and make.
It's so common.
Oh, it's so funny because they have this hilarious example of, I need to make my homework.
Yeah, classic.
I've definitely heard that one before.
And it's funny, but, it actually highlights this really fascinating aspect of language learning.
Oh, really?
It's called language transfer.
Okay.
Which is essentially where the structures of our native language can interfere with learning a new one.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, a lot of languages use just one verb for both do and make. So it's completely understandable why English learners would trip up on this.
So it's not even just a matter of like memorizing vocabulary.
Yeah.
You're saying like, my brain is actually working against me.
In a way, yeah.
Wow.
But don't worry.
Right.
Here's good news.
Okay.
By understanding these patterns of language transfer, we can actually develop strategies to overcome them.
I'm all ears. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, one really effective strategy is to create like vivid mental images or scenarios that link the verb to its appropriate use.
Gotcha.
So, for example, you could picture yourself, actively doing your homework.
Okay.
Sitting at your desk, and then imagine yourself, making a pizza.
Okay.
From scratch.
Yeah.
By associating the verbs with specific actions, you can start to internalize their subtle differences.
Oh, that's a good tip. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it. Now, they also give the example with age.
Oh, yeah.
Like saying, I have 25 years.
Yeah.
Instead of, I am 25 years old.
Right.
Which I've definitely heard that before.
Oh, for sure. And again, it just goes to show like how deeply ingrained our native language patterns are.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that fluency isn't just about memorizing grammar rules. It's about developing a feel for the nuances of the language.
So it's almost like you have to think less.
Yeah.
And just sort of feel it more.
Yeah. Trust your instincts.
Trust your gut.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. So the podcast wraps up with this fun little role play scenario.
Oh, fun.
And it takes place in an Italian restaurant.
Okay, I love Italian food.
Me too. And it's all about practicing how to order food.
That's a good one.
Which is definitely a situation where you want to feel confident.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, nobody wants to fumble through their order.
Exactly. But I'm curious, is ordering food really the most high-stakes situation?
That's a good question.
For English language learners.
I mean, I think it depends on the individual learner's goals.
Right.
And the contexts they're most likely to encounter.
Okay.
So yeah, ordering food is super practical. But I can definitely think of other scenarios that might be more high pressure.
Okay. Like what?
Imagine having to navigate a job interview in English.
Oh, yeah.
Or giving a presentation.
Totally.
Or even handling a disagreement or conflict.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, those are definitely situations where clear and confident communication is super important.
For sure. For sure. And I guess the good thing about role-playing is that you can tailor it to any situation.
Exactly. The key is to practice those scenarios that, feel the most relevant and challenging.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've talked about small talk strategies, the power of open-ended questions, the challenges of language transfer, and the value of role-playing.
Absolutely.
It's a lot. But I think the overall message here is about building confidence, right?
100%. Fluency doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And it's not about being perfect. It's about developing those skills and that confidence.
Yeah.
To be able to navigate real-world conversations.
For sure. Now I'm curious about something.
Okay.
This podcast is obviously focused on English.
Right.
But how much of this advice do you think applies to learning other languages? Are these principles of communication universal?
That is a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And I think while the specific grammar rules and vocabulary are going to vary from language to language, a lot of the underlying principles are absolutely universal.
Okay.
Things like active listening, clear articulation, using nonverbal cues effectively. Those are all crucial skills no matter what language you're speaking.
So even though this podcast was designed for English learners, anyone could take away valuable insights about communication.
Absolutely. And you know what else? There's another layer to this. It's the cultural aspect of communication. And the podcast does touch on this a little bit, talking about how communication styles can differ.
Across cultures.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've even noticed that when traveling to different countries where, for example, direct eye contact is considered rude.
Right.
And I was trying to be, engaging, and it was just coming across as aggressive.
Oh, wow.
It was a real learning experience for me.
Yeah, those cross-cultural encounters can be so eye-opening.
Yeah.
And they really highlight the importance of being culturally sensitive when you're learning a new language. It's not just about the words. It's about understanding the unspoken rules and conventions that govern communication in that culture.
So even if you're learning English, you really need to be aware of these cultural nuances.
Absolutely. It's not just about the language itself. It's about understanding the people who speak it.
It's like language is a window into a culture's soul almost.
It is. We've gotten so much more out of this English learning podcast than I expected.
It's amazing what you can discover when you really take a deep dive into something.
Yeah, it really is.
This seemingly simple podcast has sparked all this conversation about linguistics and communication theory and cultural awareness. It's great.
It just goes to show you can find valuable insights in the most unexpected places.
Totally.
Speaking of insights,
the
podcast ends by encouraging listeners to, subscribe and leave a review.
Of course.
Which you should definitely do if you're enjoying our deep dive as well.
Absolutely. But before you do that, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay, hit me.
So we talk about how communication styles can differ across cultures.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do you think those differences might specifically impact small talk in English-speaking countries?
That's a good question. I mean, it makes me think about how some cultures really value small talk.
Yeah.
As a way to, like, build rapport. And then in other cultures, it's seen as superficial.
Right.
Or even like a waste of time.
Yeah. And I imagine that could lead to some pretty awkward encounters.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Especially if you're not aware of those differences.
Exactly. And even within English-speaking countries, you know, there can be like regional variations in small talk etiquette.
That's true.
So like what might be considered friendly banter in one place could be perceived as intrusive or disrespectful in another.
Oh, wow. So it's not even enough to just learn the language.
Yeah.
You have to learn, like, the culture's unwritten rules of conversation.
It's a lot to keep in mind.
It really is.
But that's also what makes language learning so fascinating.
I know.
It's a journey of discovery, not just of words and grammar, but like different ways of thinking and interacting with the world.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about.
Me too.
We've gone from, like, simple tips for everyday English conversation to, like, exploring the complexities of language and culture.
It's been a journey.
It really has.
And I think the key takeaway here is that fluency is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about embracing the process, learning from your mistakes, and constantly expanding your understanding of communication.
Well said to all of you out there, whether you're learning English or any other language. Keep practicing, keep exploring. And never be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. And, hey, don't be a stranger. Make sure to subscribe for more fascinating deep dives into unexpected sources of knowledge. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. Hey, everyone, ready to power up your English skills? We're taking a deep dive into some awesome tips for mastering English faster.
Ooh, faster, huh? I like the sound of that.
Me too. And whether you're thinking about traveling the world or just rocking those conversations.
You may be watching movies without subtitles.
Exactly.
Ugh.
I've got you covered. So we're digging into this really cool episode.
Packed with tips, yeah.
Yeah, totally packed. And it's perfect for anyone who wants to learn quickly, but, you know, not skip the important stuff.
Right, like get that deep understanding.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. First up, they talk about this idea of immersion.
Yeah, immersion. But they're not just talking about, like, hidden the books, right?
Nope, it's way more interesting than that.
It's more about creating this English bubble around you, you know?
Ooh, an English bubble. Okay, I'm listening. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, they compare it to how we learned our first language.
Okay, yeah.
Through constant exposure.
Right, like as babies, we just hear it all the time.
Exactly. So by surrounding yourself with English, you're basically recreating that natural environment.
Like tricking your brain into thinking you're in, like, London or New York or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah, kind of. Even if you're just chilling at home. And the best part is they give some super practical tips.
Oh, do tell?
Well, they even suggest something as simple as switching your phone's language to English.
So that's a good one. I never thought of that.
Right. It's all about those little tweaks that make a big difference.
I like it. And it's not just about your phone, right?
Nope. They talk about getting your news from English sources, listening to English music, even watching movies with English audio.
Ooh, movies. That's my kind of learning.
Right. And you can start with subtitles if you need to, but the goal is to eventually ditch them and just let those sounds sink in.
Makes sense. It's like passively absorbing the language while enjoying a good film.
Exactly. And speaking of absorbing, the episode also highlights the importance of just letting go and speaking up.
Yes. They make a really good point about how it's okay to make mistakes.
It's so important. No one starts off perfect.
Definitely not me.
It's all about building that confidence and not being afraid to stumble a bit.
Which is easier said than done, to be honest.
Oh, for sure. But they have this really fun suggestion. They actually encourage talking to yourself.
Wait, like talking to the mirror?
Yep. Think of it as your own personal stage.
Okay, I can see that.
It might feel silly at first, but it's a great way to get comfortable with the sounds of English.
And they also say not to get too hung up on perfect grammar at first.
Yes. Fluency over flawlessness, right?
Definitely. It's like learning to dance. You wouldn't start by obsessing over every foot placement.
You just want to feel the music and get moving.
Exactly. Now, speaking of building, we can't forget about vocabulary.
Vocabulary, the building blocks of language.
And this episode is all about those flashcards. They even recommend apps like Anki and Quizlet.
Oh, yeah, those are great tools. Have you used them?
I've tried them out, yeah. But what I really liked about this episode is that they go beyond just rote memorization.
Right. It's not just about cramming words.
They emphasize using those words in context.
So important. Like, let's say you're learning the word enthusiastic.
Okay, enthusiastic.
Instead of just repeating it over and over, try using it in a sentence.
Like, I'm enthusiastic about this episode.
Exactly. It's about making those words come alive.
I love that. So we've got immersion, speaking up, and building our vocabulary. What's next on this Fluency Fast Track?
Well, they dive into this really cool technique for refining your pronunciation, reading aloud.
Reading aloud. Interesting. And they suggest recording yourself to compare with, like, native speakers.
Yep. Have you ever tried that?
I have, actually. It can be a little cringy at first, hearing your own voice.
Oh, totally. But also super helpful. I remember when I was learning mention a language, reading aloud was a game changer.
Oh, wow. So it really works.
It's like having a personal coach pointing out areas for improvement.
That makes sense. It's like fine-tuning a musical instrument. You need to hear those subtle nuances.
Exactly. And it's not just about the technical stuff either.
Oh, what else?
They also talk about how reading aloud can boost your confidence.
Oh, I can see that. Like being able to smoothly read something out loud is a good feeling.
For sure. And speaking of boosting skills, let's shift gears to something that might spark your creative side. Writing.
Writing. I can already feel my inner author waking up.
They really emphasize making it a daily habit, whether it's journaling, social media posts, or even starting a blog.
Ooh, a blog. Now we're talking.
And the great thing is, you don't need to be Shakespeare to get started.
Right, just start writing.
They even recommend tools like Grammarly to help you polish your writing.
Oh yeah, Grammarly's a lifesaver.
It catches all those little grammar gremlins.
Totally. But even without fancy tools, just the act of writing consistently can do wonders.
It makes you think more carefully about sentence structure, vocabulary choices, all that good stuff.
It's a mental workout for your English muscles.
Exactly. And speaking of workouts, the episode also dives into a technique that specifically targets pronunciation and fluency, the shadowing technique.
Ooh, shadowing. I've heard of that, but I'm not exactly sure how it works.
So imagine having a pronunciation coach right there in your headphones.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's basically listening to a native speaker and trying to mimic their rhythm and intonation as closely as possible.
Like you're their shadow, basically.
Exactly. And they suggest using podcasts, TV shows, even YouTube videos for this. Find someone with an accent you admire and try to copy their delivery.
That sounds kind of fun, actually.
It is. It's like a fun game of vocal mimicry.
Okay, I'm sold. So we've got immersion, speaking up, vocabulary, reading aloud, writing, and now shadowing.
And there's more. They even talk about this really interesting idea, thinking in English.
Wait, thinking in English? How do you even do that?
It's about training your brain to think directly in the language instead of constantly translating back and forth.
That sounds really challenging.
It can be, but the episode offers some great tips to make it more manageable.
Like what?
They suggest starting with small steps, like describing your day in English or planning your tasks in English. Even having imaginary arguments in English can help.
Wow, okay. Imaginary arguments, that's a new one.
It's all about pushing those boundaries and making those mental connections.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But even something as simple as thinking, I'm hungry, or I need coffee in English can make a difference.
Absolutely. It's about those small, consistent steps that add up over time.
That's encouraging. So 6 powerful techniques down. What else does this episode have in store for us?
Well, once you're kind of comfortable thinking in English, the next step is to actually, put those thoughts into action,
Put them into action, huh? How do we do that?
Conversation.
Oh, gosh. See, that's where I get a little nervous. Like, what if I freeze up or something?
It's totally normal to feel that way. Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah, okay, phew. I'm not alone then.
Not at all. But here's the good news. The episode actually talks about some online platforms that are perfect for this. They're designed for language learners, so it's a super supportive environment.
Oh, that sounds nice. Less pressure.
Right, exactly. They specifically mention italki, HelloTalk, and Tandem.
I think I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're pretty popular. It's like having a global English club right at your fingertips.
A global English club. I like that.
And what's cool is you can start with text-based conversations if you're not quite ready for, voice or video calls.
Oh, that's good to know. Baby steps, right?
Exactly. It's all about finding what you're comfortable with.
I like that. So we've got these online platforms, and then what? Just start chatting away.
Well, they also suggest finding a language partner.
A language partner? What's that?
Basically, it's someone who speaks your target language, in this case, English, and they want to learn your native language.
Oh, so you kind of help each other out.
Exactly. It's a win-win situation. You get to practice your English, and they get to practice your language. It's pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome. I'm definitely going to look into that. So we've talked about online platforms and language partners. Any other tips for, sounding more natural when we speak?
Oh, absolutely. There's this one tip that can really make a difference. They emphasize learning phrases, not just words.
Phrases, not just words. Okay, what do you mean by that?
So instead of just learning individual words like awesome, you would learn whole phrases like, that's awesome, or you did an awesome job.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's like learning chunks of language instead of just the individual pieces.
Precisely. It helps you sound more fluent and natural because you're not piecing things together in your head as you speak.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like learning the choreography for a dance instead of just memorizing the individual steps.
Perfect analogy. Now, speaking of building, the next method is all about establishing a solid foundation for your success. It's all about consistency and enjoyment.
Consistency and enjoyment. Two of my favorite things.
Mine too. They really emphasize that consistency is key. Setting small, achievable goals instead of overwhelming yourself with some massive study plan.
Yeah, small steps, right?
Exactly. Maybe start with learning 5 new words a day or practicing for just 15 minutes.
15 minutes, anyone can do that.
Right. It's about making it sustainable.
And they also remind us to reward ourselves along the way.
So important. It's not all about hard work and no play. Celebrating those small wins keeps you motivated.
Agreed. And did they talk about, specific ways to make learning more enjoyable? Because let's be honest, sometimes it could feel like a chore.
They do. They talk about finding activities that you genuinely enjoy and incorporating them into your learning. If you love cooking, maybe try following recipes in English.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or if you're a movie buff, watch your favorite movies with English subtitles.
I can do that, so it's about making it fun, basically.
Exactly. When you enjoy something, you're more likely to stick with it.
Makes sense. So we've got consistency, we've got enjoyment. Anything else we need to know about this power duo?
Well, they also highlight the importance of celebrating those milestones.
Milestones.
Finishing a chapter in an English book, having your first conversation with a native speaker, or finally figuring out that grammar rule that's been bugging you.
Oh, yeah, those are the good moments. Reaching the top of a mountain.
Exactly. And that sense of accomplishment fuels you to keep going.
So true. As we're going through all these methods, is there anything that's really resonating with you? Anything you're thinking, oh, I need to try that?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's the reminder to focus on phrases instead of just words.
Phrases, yeah.
It's such a small shift, but I can already see how much of a difference it could make.
Right. It's like a little tweak with big results.
Totally. And what's great about this whole episode is that it offers so many different techniques.
That's true. It's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about finding what works best for you and your learning style.
I love that. And it kind of ties back to that whole consistency and enjoyment thing.
Totally. The more you enjoy the process, the more likely you are to, stick with it.
And the more progress you'll make.
Exactly. But 10 methods is a lot to digest. Is there, a single takeaway we can leave our listener with today?
A single takeaway? That's a good challenge.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that learning English isn't just about, memorizing grammar rules and vocabulary lists.
Right.
It's more about making English a part of your life,
Making it a part of your life. I like that.
Yeah, weaving it into your daily routine, whether it's through the music you listen to, the shows you watch, or even just the way you think.
That reminds me of something they said in the episode that really stuck with me. They talked about how learning a language can open up so many doors.
Oh, absolutely. It's like unlocking a whole new world of possibilities.
It really is. Think about all the people you can connect with, all the stories you can access, all the experiences you can have just by being able to communicate in English.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. And it kind of makes all the effort worthwhile,
Totally. So, with that in mind, we have a final question for you.
Ooh, a question. I love questions.
Hit me. What's one small action inspired by this deep dive that you'll take today to boost your English?
Ooh, good question. Could be anything, right?
Absolutely. Like switching your phone's language to English?
Or maybe downloading one of those language exchange apps we talked about.
Or even just like taking 5 minutes to think about your day in English.
The possibilities are endless.
The important thing is to just take that first step, however small it may seem.
Because every journey starts with a single step, right?
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about language learning is that every step you take brings you closer to fluency.
So, to wrap things up, if you're feeling inspired to level up your English skills,
remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Find what works for you, make it fun, and celebrate those wins along the way.
And most importantly, never give up on your language learning dreams.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.